Well met, lords and ladies, Jacob Bowder speaking, and a warm welcome to this week's Walking Wednesday. It's been quite the interesting week, to say the least. A lot of it has involved, honestly, a fair amount of catch-up. There's two Fallen Angels scenes that I've been working on, and one of which I finished a couple of days ago, and the other one I'm still going through it. But yeah, because of everything that's happened in June, I was set back significantly, and yeah, I'm still recovering from that. So actually, yeah, sticking around and not going back to Spain this week particularly, I thought was going to work to mostly my advantage. As it turns out, it left me open to cover up for an extra class, which then, rearranged like other random stuff as well. And in general, that was it actually. Then everything kind of got pushed aside because I had the voice acting stuff to do. I thought I might have been doing D&D today, but there's a guest over, and I forgot to mention that, so I'd be certainly hosting a stream. A lot of stuff happening that I was anticipating. But that being said, probably one of the best ways to do a little bit of catch up and actually finish up a scene is a good old-fashioned editing stream, right after a full day of doing so while hanging out with one's brother and watching the entirety of season 2 of Netflix Avatar all in one go. Which was an interesting experience, partly because my brother thought we were watching more of Netflix One Piece, which we've also been working our way through, but we caught up to that one already. So yeah, that's one thing actually that he and I do a lot of, relative to our schedules, is live action adaptations of stuff. Because I get the impression that out of potentially a sense of pride, he's not super into animation before the way that we both used to be back in Spain. But he still remembers the actual properties and such. He still wants a version of it that he's allowing himself to enjoy, to play a little bit of armchair psychologist there. I bring this up because I'll circle back to that idea at the end. But the fact is, in the case for him, it's again another brand new experience with a bit more of an intense and perceived seriousness that he and for me it's a case of, okay, well, this is a thing that I remember vividly, and in lots of cases I've actively engaged in, so let's see what they do with it. It's the whole reason that I got Disney Plus originally was so I could watch Percy Jackson and the Olympians with him. In this case of both One Piece and Avatar was Netflix, but which he already had, so that worked out too. But you know what I mean. So yeah, we were there. We watched the whole thing. I went through the end of the first Fallen Angels scene, and I think by that point I was already syncing up certain things, and I kind of skipped ahead in the screenshots to the next one, and then finished up the rest of it on the editing stream while I could actually show something that was a bit visually interesting. And then I talked about it a little bit. Aiden wanted to also say his piece, but I scheduled the editing stream one day that he couldn't be around for it, which is unfortunate because of his own show that I was editing. And so after yesterday's review, he stopped me and then gave his thoughts, and we exchanged conversations. Not the only time that we've had that this week, because the other thing that to talk about is the new version, the remount of The Guy Who Didn't Like Musicals. So really the theme this week is adaptations of nostalgic material, let's say. So hold on. So if you don't know, on the Butter Bunch, actually no, I'm going to go a different way. On the Butter Bunch, there is, but we've been for quite a number of years now, but then we kind of stopped. We, watched like, as many Starkid musicals as we could like fit in. Also the Starkid adjacent stuff that the other cast members are working on, like Tin Can Bros, a lot of stuff to do with them. Some stuff we had seen before, like, like Nightmare Time and Little White Lie, etc. Really just going for a full completionist route, just milking the fact that that Starkid's fanbase is so loyal, and we are, to a certain degree, like, I have more exposure to them in general because I've been watching their content for a long time. Certain aspects of it, not all of it. And BB&A didn't get the novel experience, so I'm sort of like a middle person in between those. It's a very fascinating thing. It also takes forever. Another setback I was going to mention that I forgot was the fact that not only did we start an hour later than usual because I wanted like a particular intro to exist, but then it went on for another 3 hours on top of that. So, and that was the day before I got called in as a as a cover. So, once again, my plans to rest up before flying have to a certain extent failed spectacularly. But so yeah, I didn't know the Remake was going to come out this weekend. It's like the Bond, by the way. Shout out to Bond for actually informing us that it had come out a couple of days ago, and people were already crawling over the Easter eggs behind it, which is a difference between when the original Guided Musicals came out, because when you go back and watch it, you can absolutely tell that they had a lot of stuff figured out already in terms of Hatchetfield as a whole. But this time, they're adding more things to try and keep people, on their toes, which is something that actually connects it thematically to Netflix Avatar, actually, because it's something that I've been thinking about while watching Netflix Avatar. This is where I get into like a bit of like the spoiler territory, so to speak. They get to the Serpent's Pass in the first episode, which was the first major, red flag for me specifically, because I was like, why are they doing this here already? And I pointed out the fact that doing the Serpent's Pass before they cover losing Appa, which was the whole reason that they had to cross the Serpent's Pass in the first place, and they couldn't just fly into Ba Sing Se on Appa, although, to be perfectly honest, they might have been shot down by General Sung if they did that, or at least fired at. But yeah, I guess they decided that they weren't enough people to there weren't enough there were too many people to fit on him for one journey, to which I say, you could have done several, really. But yeah, so maybe honestly this is a bit of a sore spot. Perhaps it was like the Great Divide, where they decided that, okay, this is it's not going to work if I just fly everyone over, like with this we've got to use like the tour guide normally and such. So yeah, I guess that might have been something like that. There have a few examples of certain excuses where they can't just fly over on Appa in general in the original show. In this one, they don't really bother with them, and he's still there. To be honest, Appa is probably the most hard done by character in the adaptation, when you think about it, because he's the one who had like the major stuff that happens to him happen only in the last like episode or so, which by that point already felt like there was almost no point to it, because what they did is they used the losing of Appa as one of like as a major thing for the third act falling out, essentially. Not that that's not how that happens originally, but by that point they've already drilled in the idea that Aang is under so much pressure, and in his mind his friends don't understand that, even if they think they do, which is an idea planted into him by someone else, but so I'm not going to be like, oh, well, this doesn't feel like in character for him because he had other influences instead. So yeah, they wanted that, and they wanted Aang to lash out at Toph. They had other stuff like the Painted Lady, for example. That's another thing where I was like, the Painted Lady's showing up now? Really? And Aiden also had a huge problem with that. And I'll say this. Initially, I was definitely concerned about handling the Painted Lady. There's definitely adaptations out there that basically, even according to like Aiden's own words, was kind of like, hey, remember the Painted Lady? Remember how cool that was? Here's this thing. Not they couldn't have gotten to it when they did it originally anyway. It was just what was the goal there? Why introduce that at this point, and also why I believe to be an original character who establishes that, because I don't remember her name actually, but the florist lady. Honestly, maybe she could have been the one that cured Aang and Katara. Well, no, it's not Katara when they were sick, but I don't think that they covered that, so I don't remember. But yeah, so again, I was like, okay, what's the point here? And it wasn't until I saw the Painted Lady and the Blue Spirit together that it clicked for me. Because I don't know why I never considered this. That's something that Katara and Zuko have in common. They both don disguises, disguises as part of their journeys as characters, and for different reasons. According to Overanalyzing Avatar, the Blue Spirit symbolizes Zuko's desperation more than anything else. There's still a thing where he's like taking measures into his own hands. Remember, Zuko thought he was good, so that's so you could even say that he was trying to serve a good in his own mind, and Katara was actually serving a good, and very, very much so. And one thing that Aiden said that I don't agree with is that having the connection to the Blue Spirit, or like the comparison to the Blue Spirit, ties in her story to a man in his words, which I don't think that's the case. They still feel separate enough, but just a mirror to each other. The fact that it happens to be a man and woman is like, I don't think either one of them overpowers the other. If anything, there's more Painted Lady material in this season than Blue Spirit stuff. Obviously, Blue Spirit came in earlier in the time anyway, so there's a more established idea. But yeah, even despite that, as long as she figures out who the Blue Spirit is before the reveal, I believe Aang yells out Katara's name, which, by the way, really funny detail there. Sometimes my brother will ask me questions about things we're watching because he knows that I know like more answers of things, and sometimes I'll just ignore him because they're either going to explain in a scene right when he asks it, or they're going to get to an event, so I don't ruin the surprise. Because, like I said, I semi-envy his ability to forget pieces of media and watch them again as if they were brand new. But I also love remembering these things because that's kind of, that's what I do. But yeah, so we have that contrast, and in his case, yeah, he asked me who the Painted Lady was. So apparently the disguise actually worked. And bear in mind, we see Katara's face multiple times during those presentations. And even when Aang said Katara's name, it was like, well, there you go, there's your answer. Wait, no, who was that? That's it. Katara, they just said. What are you talking about? So it was really funny to me that the disguise worked way better than I think they were originally intending it to. Because in a lot of like vigilante, superhero, whatever you would equivalent disguises are meant to fool the people in universe, but be obvious to us. You know, think you're Clark Kent Superman situation. We of course all know exactly what's going on, but to a person who's in the moment and also not thinking about it, and maybe there's something else. You know what? Another example: Miraculous. They covered their bases because they're man of the mask of magic. So even with that, there's been no recognizability anyway. But yeah, it's still the same idea. It's like it's obvious to us, the audience, every time. If they introduced a Miraculous holder and didn't say who it was, and they weren't like more covered up to the same degree that like Hawkmoth was, for example, then that'd been more of a thing. Which is also a point, by the way, where Miraculous, they sort of like go back and forth whether want the Hawkmoth's identity to be a surprise or not, because the Origins episode spoils it halfway through the season, but in terms of the rest of them, they don't really show in season 1 at all. And season 2, they aside from like the grimoire and stuff, it's like, oh wait a minute, is that the connection? And then season 2, episode 1, they make it blatant. So if it weren't for the Origins episode, I would be interested to know who was initially unaware of that, if there were anyone, if there was anyone. But anyway, back to these scenarios. So the one part where I'll agree with Aiden a little bit is that the Painted Lady coming out in book 3 originally, when they were in the Fire Nation, is also to the benefit of the Fire Nation are the ones like that are in trouble. It's one of their own towns. There's and so it's not like there's like enemy like defectors or something. Which, by the way, Zhong, what have they done to you? But I've even said his name actually. Just that when he said he deserted, it's like, oh okay, that's him. And there's in a White Lotus, so yeah, of course it's him. In fact, there's actually that used to be a thing in season 1 where I kept saying like, wait, is that Jet? Wait, that's the Mechanist. He's here. A lot of stuff like that. But go back to what I was saying here. Yes, the fact that it's like Fire Nation defectors sort of doesn't like add those in there. But we've already had we've already had Jet's militant disdain for the Fire Nation contrasting that of Team Avatar and even Katara herself. Not to mention also, again, they're going to end up in the Fire Nation anyway in season 3. So it's not like that there's no chances for other moments in there for Katara. Because she didn't say a famous line yet of "I'll never turn back on people who need me," so they might be saving that. So I'm going to reserve judgment about the targets of Katara's philanthropy until we see what they do next time, because it could go either way, and until such a time, I'm not gonna make a final verdict on that. But for now, I'll say Painted Lady Katara, don't mind that. But yeah, back to what I was saying. Things like that aspect are ones where it's a surprise when these things happen and what direction they go in. Other stuff that they changed around mostly seem to serve the purpose of keep the people like myself who have seen the show various times. I think I've watched it all the way through 3 times. That's nowhere near the same amount as a lot of other people have. Keep people like us on our toes. Because that's one thing that I wonder. I mean, on one hand, they could just about almost squeeze in, every episode, remake as much as possible from there, and then try to cram those into like the the 1 hour to 40 minutes like slots that they had. Mathematically, it might have just worked out, give or take a couple of things. But yeah, that would have, I think that would have been like a satisfying way to watch them. There's also the fact that the original show was structured in a way that it works as entertainment in 22-minute intervals, because, you know, with beginnings, middles, and ends, even with its serialization. So they either had to like try to stretch those episodes into further points, or come back and forth between a few of them, like this episode 2, or they had to try to shove a bunch of like things into 10 episodes worth of content into one episode, like in episode 1. And it's like, okay, with the shoving of 10 episodes worth of content into the first one, I sort of get that. I don't like it, but I get why they did it, because they wanted to get to Toph as soon as possible. Aiden also pointed out that he knows a few more things behind the scenes about their refusal to cast an actual blind person to play Toph instead of using contacts to make her blind. I thought when he said, "Oh, they didn't cast a blind person to play Toph," I was like, "Oh, well, for safeguarding, I can understand that. You know, this is a very violent series in general. You know." But then apparently they had somebody who was there, who was able to train blind people for martial arts, and they just made her blind anyway. So it's like they're creating risks regardless. When I explained that, I was like, yeah, no, that is definitely a very weird choice. What exactly was the point of that? The only thing I could imagine is that they didn't find anyone else that looked as much like Toph. Because I remember one person saying that, you know, essentially the people they found for particularly the main characters seem very much like just clones of themselves. That's kind of like fall off the wayside now, because of course they changed General Sung's entire gender, for example. They also Sai and Zhong as well don't look exactly the way that they used to either. So yeah, they're a bit fast and loose with that nowadays. But yeah, I guess they didn't want to be so for Toph particularly, because Toph is the first time that she's ever been adapted into live action, because we never got that far in the movie, which also had a number of scenes that were lifted straight from the source material and reconstructed as much as possible, but without like the heart or the stakes behind it. So maybe they were also trying not to recreate those sins of the past. But yeah, the main thing I could think of in terms of how Netflix Avatar handled a lot of stuff is they took various different detours in other directions to get to the same points. Sort of similarly to the best like metaphor I can use, or best allegory, is actually the map from the original book 1 of Avatar, where they you know, Zuko and his ship crew are piling over the map that they've done, like tracking Appa's movements, and they're saying, you know, he's clearly a master of evasive maneuvers, and then it fades into Sokka holding the map, and it's just like, we have no idea where you're going, do you? Or something like that, and you see like the scribbles around them. But despite the detours they take, they eventually reach the North Pole. In this sense, the North Pole represents the end. In this allegory, it represents the end of season 2. You know, the end point of, you know, of entering the Avatar state, which was, you know, not as built up in this version, granted, but, you know, was mentioned from the first episode, went into the last, and, you know, and getting struck down, the Earth Kingdom falling, and them being at their darkest moment, Empire Strikes Back style. So yeah, and again, they get there. They have to hit several plot beats to get to achieve that. But again, they eventually manage. Problem is that when they actually, like, you know, crammed so much beforehand, they had to stay in Ba Sing Se for way longer. My brother pointed out that, when are they going to leave this place? Like, it's supposed to feel you know, sort of, you know, like a trapped scenario, but not to the same degree, and not for that long of a running time either. So yeah. But I can definitely, if I put myself in their shoes, I'd be like, well, no one's going to be surprised by anything we do here, and if we just remake the stuff in live action, then they'll say, what was the point of even attempting this? Not they don't already. People are already asking what's the point of a Netflix adaptation. The original series is already on Netflix, so I don't know. But yeah, I get that. It's not like there aren't things that it does well. In fact, there's actually a couple of changes that I actually really, really enjoy. One particularly, actually, and that's what they did to Long Feng. Long Feng, I think, is a very underrated antagonist. Mostly because he's so easily upstaged, you know, don't flatter yourself, you're not even a player, you know, whatever. But the idea of somebody who is able to oppose the most, you know, the most powerful person, you know, physically in their entire world, just through his influence alone, that apparently clawed himself up from the bottom. You know, started from the bottom, now he's here. You know, that classic line. And doesn't even, most of the time, doesn't need to exert actual force. This is original characterization, by the way. There's a lot of value to that. They sort of gave him the same treatment as Zhao in this case, whereas Zhao sort of, you know, toadied himself a little bit more to Zuko versus his immediate opposition in the original series, and his intentions being made clear to actually capture the Avatar before him. He sort of like made his way up in terms of like, you know, gathering intel in a friendly manner, and then betraying him. Which, you know, again, not my favorite version, because, you know, honestly, Zhao is I think the most underrated antagonist in the entire show, mostly because he's upstaged immediately by Azula, which, you know, that's a tough act to, you know, to be followed by for anyone, obviously. But he has a lot of merit that doesn't get as appreciated. And a similar thing with Long Feng. And with Long Feng, they did the similar thing where instead of obviously like toading up to and trying to become, you know, buddy-buddy with Zuko, in this case it was trying to be buddy-buddy with Aang. And then when I mentioned before about like Aang's idea that someone input the idea that, you know, his friends don't understand the pressure that he's under, Long Feng similarly establishes how much like of Ba Sing Se he actually is responsible for, and how much pressure that puts him under, and that being a bit of a we're not so different, you and I sort of mentality. And they also don't establish that he is that you know, he is the leader of the Dai Li, which is another thing that again, obviously I knew the whole time, but yeah, they but yeah, even like in imagining from somebody who's I didn't ask my brother about like what he thought about the Long Feng twist or anything. I'm not sure how obvious it was to somebody who doesn't remember the original series as militantly. He told me he watched it. I'm not sure when, or if that's even the case or not. It might have been, you know, it might have been messing with me, but yeah, he's told me he's seen it, at least at some point. That being said, whenever we put it actually on again, hard reset, like I said before. But yeah, it's because I have to imagine that's the same thing that Long Feng did to the Earth King. You know, actually pulling off his, you know, his Grimer Wormtongue, you know, archetype of his character, to that degree, and for that long. It's like, yeah, you can absolutely see what he's doing, and then how much intel he had that he saved and revealed for that breakup to work. I don't like the fact that it essentially replaced, you know, the desert, because not only did originally Toph couldn't, like, you know, bend in sand, which they skipped entirely in this one, they ignored, but also they were on solid ground this time, so Toph probably could have very easily done something at least They probably couldn't have gone as far because, you know, they weren't sandbenders this time that had the that had, like, you know, powerful enough vessels to take him away. Appa, this is. And then and it wasn't even gone for that long. So I don't like how they got to that point, but again, I can see what they were trying to do of, like, okay, you know, now Toph's lost Appa. They mentioned the painted lady thing here. They also brought up this idea that the Beifongs were making things for the Fire Nation, which was originally Psy's thing, but they already did like a Psy spy thing last time. You know, another minor change of, like, okay, they're ruthless business people. So be it. I even remember, like, my brother mentioning that because Toph's mother was the one who came to pick her up this time, instead of having someone, like, you know, be able to take her back instead. Serves as a way to, you know, he said that, oh, mother kind of has a point, because who wants their 12-year-old daughter going to war? Which, you know, I said to him, if that were her only concern, I would 100% agree, but unfortunately, clearly it isn't. You know. I guess, you know, all the Beifongs got more focus this time, not just Toph. Well, I say all, but not really her father as much. Which I guess is another change, because Toph's mother in the original continuity doesn't do that much, really. So the fact that there's, like, they gave us some more stuff is like, yeah, alright, sure, why not? Because most of the stuff they give to her father was, like, either, like, mentioned in the comics or, you know, just stuff in general that they get that it was, like, behind the scenes. So yeah, so I don't like how he got there, but I see, like, how Longfeng saved, like, his intel and then made the third act falling out even possible to begin with. But yeah, like I said, you know, the real thing is, like, how well do you think the replacement methods they got to certain things work versus the original? Like, for example, you know, Aang and Iroh just running into each other randomly rather than Iroh seeking them out specifically. In order to help Zuko. It's like, oh, isn't it fortunate we run into each other like this? Like, yeah, it kind of is. But yeah, overall, like I said, there are some things I really like about this. There are some things that I really don't like about it. And that's overall kind of what I was anticipating in general. I'm not going to be one of those people who's going to say, oh, I hate that they even, like, bothered with this, you know, what a complete waste of time, money, and resources, and yada, yada, yada. I like the fact there's, like, another version they're trying. I like the fact there's that it actually, you know, it doesn't detract as much as the movie did, and it understands certain things that are important, and it just tries to recontextualize them, like the haiku stuff with Sokka, like, adding to Toph. Toph gets put in, like, in several more scenarios that she was really needed to be in before. But yeah, a few more Sokka and Toph moments didn't go amiss for sure. But her being in Monty Tong's library and having the raised characters being able to read them, not as much a fan of. But yeah, I could go on and on, basically, but I also want to talk about Gaidai musicals, because that's another adaptation we watched recently that, as I said before, shares a theme, which is, you know, they didn't so much as, you know, make big changes or anything, which was almost to its downfall, I'd say. They almost could have benefited from doing what Netflix Avatar did, because they, as I was pointing out, the pacing, especially towards the beginning, was very, very rough in comparison. Not only have all the tempo has been reduced somewhat, and some of the keys changing for better or worse depending on the song itself, but there are so many more awkward pauses in between where I think where it's perceived that they're pausing for laughter, because they now know where the laughter is going to be, because they've done the show before. Problem with that is, the impression I get is that the audience have seen the show so many times that the original lines don't land in a surprise moment, because a lot of Star Kids comedy hinges on the surprise and the ridiculousness of it. If you know what's coming, it's not as effective. But it's not a second time round, or again, people who have watched Guided musicals over and over and over and over again. So some of the the best moments for laughter, I guess, would have been things like, you know, Ted this time staying on a swivel chair for his first scene and having some physicality around that instead. And you know, playing around with that. And I think also, you know, Paul being strangled by the phone call, stuff like that. The new slapstick that they had, basically, compared to before. As far as a remount goes, I also they didn't really mount that much more. There are a couple of he was like, oh yeah, you've got like stage windows now and such. It's not all on one level, but you're still using like the typical like Star Kid method of you know, the imaginary props and stuff, which you think, you know, for a regular Star Kid budget is like, yeah, you expect that. You know, they're imagining a lot of things, they're making the noises, they're doing, you know, all of that. After Cinderella's Castle, and after the idea that they're putting more money into the production this time, the fact they still have those things is to its detriment. I think part of the heart of the original show was sort of lost, and also again the fact that, you know, they're doing this again now when Guided Musicals was probably the best bridge they could have asked for between middle era Star Kid of you know, higher production value, better camera quality, still super ridiculous and heightened, versus the Hatcherfield era where, you know, things get dark and gritty a lot more. One thing that, you know, the commentators kept on saying is they're better performers now, but I think a lot of them are, you know, better performers in the sense they're hamming things up a lot more to try to get the same reaction they did before. And the problem is that the characters in Guided Musicals worked so well because they felt that much more natural. And that was like the first Star Kid production that was, you know, fully set in the year that it came out, trying to simulate reality until things start going awry. Which again was a surprise, but also again there was enough ridiculousness to pass over like those two different eras to get people used to what they're doing further with Hatchetfield. And it really worked. Like I said, The Guided Light Musicals is one of my two favourite musicals of all time. The other one being Firebringer, which I think was the one they did right before it, actually. So, yeah. Yeah. That's, But yeah, and also another reason why I think, you know, well, Bond speculates that, you know, Will Branner as Professor Higgins, you know, being like a new casting for him, works to its advantage as well, because the other times that Star Kid has recreated or redone their other material, like VHS Christmas Carol, for example, other people have played the main characters, all the different, well, I don't think they swapped like all of them, but a lot of them. And again, that's as a surprise. There's some stuff to compare. And I said before that with VHS Christmas Carols, the first version that they published, I think is the best one to listen to. Like that's the one that I'll put on if I'm just if I'm like, you know, doing something else around the house or whatever, and I've got my headphones on. If I want to actually watch it, I'll put on the 2024 version. Or I guess 2023, depending on when they, you know, what date they're actually establishing. Yeah. So I guess in a way, I see, you know, what something, you know, could have been if it plays something either too safe or, you know, relies on the nostalgia aspect of it so much to not attempt anything new. So that's why I'm not mad at Netflix Avatar in general. I don't like the decision they landed on a lot of the time, but some of them I do. It does a guide to like musicals. Like, yeah, all you can really do is say like, you know, okay, and originally I did like this thing here that went a bit better. There were some things that were improved. I mean, BB pointed out that Jamie Lynn Beatty as Charlotte really works like much better, aside from the accent not being as pronounced this time. You know, that's one thing that we kind of miss. It's still there, but it's one of those things where if you do a voice for a long time that it settles in a particular area that was not where it was originally, and that's where it's comfortable. It's that scenario. But yeah, overall, it still seems like, you know, the low budget original version is definitely still the one to go by, which I guess is true for both Netflix Avatar and Guided by Musicals, but one definitely more obviously than the other. It's interesting to me because Guided by Musicals was apparently, according to the chat, meant to be the last story in the Hatchetfield musical trilogy. You know, the last remaining story to tell. Which, yeah, gave me a minor concern when it was originally came out. But yeah, but because of, again, it was the one that they could put on the, you know, the easiest out of all of the Hatchetfield ones, they decided to do it first instead. Which, yeah, I mean, I definitely get it. I think it worked out in the end because it foreshadows, you know, a few things in Nerdy Prudes Must Die and beyond. And, you know, Emma and Paul actually, you know, showing up in Black Friday first is not as powerful as them coming back and then people, like, you know, squealing because it's like, oh my god, it's them, you know. I get it. Ironic enough, also, apparently they're working on the fourth Hatchetfield musical now, according to the chat, so it wasn't the last remaining story after all. But but that's why I was saying I think it worked in the way and where it was when it came out, and, you know, and what it represented, and the fact they didn't change it or they had nothing else different about it. Like, that's what I mean. The one thing that they added is, like, a few other cameos. Like, of course, they had Wool around as a freshman version of Max Jaegerman, which proved the fact that, like, you know, the original Pete Spankowski scene recreation happened to be, you know, 3 years separately, and he went to the same place again and was not as effective, and Paul and Emma were still there introducing each other, and it was like, well, why? I had a bit of a crash out about that one. But yeah, if you want extra cameos and other details, like the pastries being the same initials as the Lords in Black, then great. If not, I don't know, stick to the version that already exists and is available on the same platform, which some people are going to say about Netflix Avatar as well. So again, it's all very much connected. But I think I've made my point, really. So I guess that's the thing about, like, lots of live action adaptations. If I think about like, you know, it's been too long since I watched One Piece to remember, like, what order they do things in specifically in that one. So I guess for me, as someone who remembers, like, aspects of things, but as for all intents and purposes a new person watching, it works pretty well. Percy Jackson has once, well, already the story was about, like, recontextualizing the Greek gods into the modern world, and that's what they're doing again. They're recontextualizing them, and isn't as fast and loose with the order of things. So again, another one that mostly works for me, just with a few aspects that are, you know, honestly could have served, like, a few other cameos. Like, we knew that, like, Nico and Bianca were in the Lowe's Hotel and Casino when Percy, Annabeth, and Grover first arrived. We don't see them, for example. But yeah, that's kind of it. That's just one thing I think of where it's like, I mean, yeah, if you don't try to take risks, you don't change a couple of things, then you are going to end up in a pointless scenario, rather than just you know, a strong maybe, as is most often the case otherwise. So that's kind of the lesson, I suppose. I mean, so, you know, I personally say let's to a certain degree hold them accountable, but reserve the final verdicts of, oh, I despise this thing, until the end. Then we'll see if they stick the landing. which I guess is also true for Guardians because I haven't seen the second act yet. Maybe they'll stick the landing. Maybe I'll find out sometime next week, or maybe because I'm traveling again, I will be away, and that will be impossible to execute. That's actually one thing I've got to concern myself with. So we shall see. That's conversation we're going to have at some point. But for now, conversation time is over. So please leave a like or dislike because your opinion matters. And subscribe if you haven't done so already. And on that note, until next time, farewell.